What's up, guys? So today I'm going to show you how to disassemble and reassemble the steering column out of your 69 Corvette. I'm sure this will work for other years, similar years of GM cars or Corvettes, but this is what I have. I wasn't able to find many good videos of this online, so I just wanted to make this video and give as much detail as I can in case anybody else needs this information out there. So this column came in that car that I just showed you. And when I got it, it was missing a lot of pieces. And I was able actually to find this other column on Marketplace out of a 69 Corvette, which I used as a parts column. I was able to get all of the parts that I needed and rebuild this one. So I've had this one apart many times. It took me a few times to figure out exactly where everything goes and how it all goes. But now I've got a good idea. I'm going to show you guys exactly how to take this apart and reassemble everything, because there's a lot of small components and it's pretty frustrating if there's no good videos or you're just trying to figure it out for the first time. Quick side note, like I said, this one has been apart before, so it's not totally assembled, but it's pretty much everything is ready to go. There's just one small clip here that I have not put back on that holds the steering column in place, but I will show you where that goes as well as all the other components. Okay, so first thing that you're going to want to do is pop off the horn button here. This just pulls right out. It's got these little retainers that hold it in, and it'll be right here. Just pull it out gently and easily and it should just pop right out. Underneath that, you'll have the horn button assembly. This whole assembly is just held in by 3 screws here, here, and here. Just take those out and then you'll be able to actually get to this nut, which kind of holds the whole assembly together. So what we can do next is remove the nut here. Sometimes you might have to find a way to hold the column in place so it doesn't turn as you break it apart. Luckily this one wasn't too bad. I was just able to use my ratchet and put my foot on the other end actually and pop it out. But the steering wheel will actually be pressed onto the column itself, the steering shaft. So you'll need to get some kind of puller. I just used one of these 3-jaw pullers from Harbor Freight. Right here. Looks kind of like this, except it has feet on it that'll go inside here, and there's actually a small lip you can use to pull on with a bolt too actually. So I just used a nut that came on the column, threaded it on just a little bit, and then I was able to put this puller in the center of the nut and then use those jaws to pull out from inside of the steering column, or steering wheel, sorry. So like I said, that'll just pull right off the whole steering wheel assembly. Put that to the side. And then you'll find this little part right here, just pops right off with 3 screws. This little plate, unscrew like so. Another thing I recommend is, because there's so many parts here, small little parts, and they're easy to forget where they go. So when you disassemble this, put everything in order, lay it out on your table, so then you can just go in the reverse order to put everything back together. Makes it a little bit easier for you. But we'll pop that plate off, those 3 screws, and then the next thing here is, I was talking about that little retaining little piece of steel, this little like C-clip type thing. These are pretty tricky, but actually this plate here, which is the locking plate for the steering wheel, it actually be pushed back and held in place by that little C-clip I just showed you. So you'll want to use that steering wheel puller again and just reverse the threads the other way, and you'll push this plate back. It's spring loaded, and then you'll have access to this clip. When we get there, I'll show you where this what groove this sits in on the steering shaft, so you'll know. But you can rent those steering wheel pullers and installers from, like, I get mine at O'Reilly's, just rent it for a day and it does the job just fine. So we'll keep moving on. And then, so like I said, this plate will be held in by that little clip, retaining clip. So once you're able to push this back with that tool, like I just mentioned from O'Reilly's, then you'll be able to remove this plate, the locking plate. Set that to the side, and then you can just pull this little this is part of the steering wheel button. Just pull this out of the way. Also part of the steering wheel button, you'll be able to pull this part out of the way. And then lastly, you'll have your spring here, which puts tension on the whole assembly and holds everything together, especially for that button, horn button. But now I can show you where that C-clip, where that sits. So you'll see here, there's a groove right here, which is where that C-clip will retain. I didn't have any luck using like pliers or anything getting that off. It's pretty tedious to do, but just a small screwdrivers, and I have a pick set here. Using a combination of those, I was able to wedge the pick under it and then kind of work it around the clip, and then I was able to slide it off, but it is pretty tough. Just give it some time and eventually it will come off. Okay, so at this point we're getting into the turn signal switch assembly. The first thing to do to remove this is to actually take out the lever arm here that actually turns the steering wheel switch, works your indicator. Just a screw here, so we'll pop this off. Slides right out of the side here. Put that off to the side. And then the next thing you'll want to do is remove these 3 screws. There's one here, one there, and one over here. That actually holds this whole switch assembly in place. So you can move this and click it wherever you need it to get access to these screws, but just pop those out and then we'll be able to slide out the steering wheel switch here. And like I previously said, for this column, I got into it and I realized I was missing a lot of parts, like these screws that hold the steering or the turn signal switch in place. I was just looking for a few screws online and I was already in for like 50 bucks. So, and that was just with finding the missing parts I knew I was missing. I didn't exactly know what all little components I was missing. But for me, finding a cheap column on the internet for sale, a used one, was definitely the way to go, because I got all the parts I needed and in the long run saved myself a ton of money. So I would definitely recommend doing that to you if you're able to, if you do have that option. It definitely helps a lot. But anyway, we got those 3 screws out here for the turn signal switch. The next thing to do is actually slide this out of the steering column. The switch is, the wiring runs through the center of the column here and then all the way out to the bottom to your ignition switch. Flip this around and give you a better view of that. So like I said here, the steering or the turn signal switch here has wires that run all the way down it. It has this sleeve on it which kind of helps you get it out, and then your switch, the actual connector, is right here. So you'll just want to kind of pull gently on this side, push down here. You'll have to wiggle it a little bit to clear some things on the inside of the column, but just slide it out and it'll come eventually. It just takes a little bit of time. Also at this point, want to remove this flasher switch here. It's just one screw there in the center. Unscrew it, get that out of the way. And then I will also remove this cover. It's just a small bolt screw here. And then this plastic cover will slide down. So like I said, just one little screw here to remove the flasher. Okay, so that's out of the way. And then I will also remove this plastic cover. It's just that little nut that I showed you. Remove that. And that'll slide down. Give it a little more access. And then the next thing to do is now you can start pushing and pulling on the bottom and top of this light switch, or I'm sorry, turn signal switch. And then just it'll work its way out up through the steering column. Okay, so now that we have the turn signal switch out of the way, the last part that's holding on this column here is just these 4 bolts here. This was another part that I was missing on mine, where the donor column came in handy because I was able to get these bolts. They were like 15 bucks online. So again, I'm already doing pretty well on my investment there. But remove these 4 bolts, and then this will just slide right off. And then we will have, from there you'll be able to access the key assembly if you need to get into that. So yeah. Okay, we got those 4 screws out. So now this assembly will slide off of the steering column shaft. There is a little washer here on top of this bearing that's in this assembly. So make sure you remove that. Sometimes they like to stick. Make sure you remove that and don't lose it. And then this will just slide right off. And then this also, with this ignition key switch, you'll actually have the rod on it that goes down through the column into the ignition switch at the bottom of the column. So when you get to this point, you'll need to turn it in order to clear this little turn in the steel rod right here. But just turn it, it'll come right out. So at this point, you pretty much have the column totally disassembled, and you can start replacing any parts you need to, cleaning everything up. This is not going to be the last time I take this one apart. I just need to get it in the car there so it's movable and turnable. I obviously have a lot more work to do before I'm ready to worry about making this look good. But the last thing to do would be to push this shaft all the way through the column, and that just helps with reassembly. So at this point, when you have everything removed, it'll just slide right out. Don't make the same mistake I did, is removing this clip right here. I thought for reassembly, I would have to take this off, but you actually don't, and it's really hard to get off. So don't make that mistake and leave this clip on there. So at this point, like I said, we're totally disassembled and we're ready to start putting everything back together. It's pretty much just the reverse process of how we took everything off. So let me get this shaft out of here. Just pushes right through the bottom, and then we'll start putting everything back together. A few things to note about the steering columns ignition switch assembly here. So you'll have your lock key, your ignition key that goes in here, and the cylinder turns this rod, which then pushes on the ignition switch down there, and puts the car into ignition, accessory, and run position. So if you take this out, you'll want to make sure that you can put it back in the correct order. So I'll just show you here what it looks like. You turn the key here. So if you look closely at these 2 gears down here, you'll want to make sure that the top one, I'll show you on this spare I got. So you have these kind of gears inside of this this bronze piece here, whatever it is, and then you also have the other gear that is part of your cylinder assembly. You'll want to make sure that these mesh right, and then looking back here at the assembled one, you can kind of see how it goes, where this topmost gear on this silver rod here meshes with the topmost part of this, the other gear that's on the lock cylinder. So I replaced mine because it was kind of worn out. This is the old one. Teeth are kind of beat up on it. It's just a piece of plastic here. So if you need to do that, you can remove your lock cylinder at this point, and then just apply a little pressure here, and this pops right off of the shaft that it rides on. If you need to replace your lock cylinder, you can do this with this part still on the car. But what you'll want to do is find this slot right here. It's kind of hard to see, there's not much light, but this slot will go all the way through. And from the factory, these are actually cast solid, and you can't get anything through there. I guess it's like a safety thing, so no one steals your car or changes your locks or whatever. But I just use this little screwdriver here and a hammer, and just was able to punch through it. It's pretty thin. And then from there, you'll be able to get something thinner. Like I used one of these picks. And then you can just wedge the pick in that slot. And then you'll release a detent that actually holds this lock cylinder in. And then from there, you can just slide it on or slide it out. And then just note the orientation that it comes out in. And then the new one will just simply slide right back in, making sure that you engage it with this gear because they interlock right there. And then that's how, obviously, your key works when you turn it. Another thing to note is there is also a component in there that locks that locks the steering wheel as part of the locking mechanism, and then that'll clip in just like this to this part. So you'll just slide those two in there, and make sure those gears align and connect correctly like I showed you here, just like that. Both at the top of the teeth, topmost gears, make sure you mesh correctly, and then you can reinstall this back into the steering column. There's also this plastic piece that gets put on the bottom side of this assembly here. For reassembly though, we'll just stick it right there like that. And then, yeah, so once that's all done, and you have that looking good, then we can proceed with the reassembly here. Okay, so I have the column oriented here as it would be in your car. This is like the top side, your ignition key would be right here. And then we're gonna start reassembling this. So first thing we wanna do, slide this rod through there. You'll see where light comes through, and then you'll know it's the correct way in to put this rod. We'll slide it in just until the part that makes that sharp turn at the end of the rod here comes through the other side. Then we'll just quickly turn it. That way we can pass that turn in the rod, and then we'll just continue to push it down on the shaft here. And then you'll know it's all the way seated. You should have a pretty tight gap between these two pieces. And then obviously when you bolt this down, it'll hold it nice and in place. But that's how it should look at this point. We'll just put in these 4 bolts again and continue with reassembly. Another thing I want to note while we're here about the steering column shaft is that I thought that for reassembly, again, I just want to emphasize this because it's a pain, but I thought for reassembly you had to take this clip off, but that was before I knew that you can just slide the steering column shaft all the way out through the bottom of it. So the best thing to do here is just push this shaft down a little bit and get it out of your way. Otherwise, you'll have trouble trying to put this back on and tightening it up. So once this is bolted down here, then you can just slide the shaft all the way forward and proceed with reassembly. Okay, so I got this tightened back on. The rod's in there like so. We can connect that to the ignition switch later, but that's where you need it. This is kind of the gap you should have here. It should be pretty tight once you're done. Just tighten these down, these 4 bolts down evenly, and then this will pull it all the way down square, and it'll square itself up where it needs to go. I used power drill here, but you know, these bolts are pretty tough to find, and I would recommend just using a wrench, because if you strip one, you're kind of screwed at that point. But now that we have that done, we can put our washer back on the shaft here, and then not much else to do, but I'll show you the reverse part of it. We'll put all of our horn components back on, our locking plate, our turn signal switch, and then yeah, we're almost done. Okay, so before we put our ignition switch back in, there's one thing I want to note about it. If you turn it over and look at the back here, there's this kind of boss part here. Not sure exactly what it is. I think it potentially could be like a grounding point for some of the wires in here, but this part right here, this boss, will have to fit inside of this where this bolt is here. It fits in there nice and tight, and then that helps line everything up and makes it flush where it needs to go. So just note that when you're putting it back together. It may be a little bit tough to line up because some of these wires are a little stiff and that sort of thing, but just push it where you need to go, be gentle, and it'll fall right into place. And then you can put those 3 screws in where they go, tighten everything down. And then as far as getting this into the column, just the reverse of how we took it out. So just kind of a push and pull all the way down. The end here might get caught on some things. Try to look down the shaft where you can, see where it's getting caught. Maybe use a screwdriver or something long and flat if you need to push something out of the way. This sleeve that also goes over the wires is kind of prone to getting caught on things like here when you're pushing down. Just be mindful of that, and then just work it back and forth, and eventually it'll go down and find its spot where it needs to go. But so yeah, we'll do that real quick, and then I'll meet back up with you guys. At this point, we can also put on our lever here for our flashers, and also our turn signal lever here. So we'll just slide them in, put the screws in, and take care of that. Okay, we got both our flasher switch and our turn signal lever on. So the next thing to do would be to put on this spring here. This slides on like that. You can pull the shaft more towards you also at this point. We're starting to put together the final pieces here for like the horn and the locking plate, these sort of things. So this is also the point where you're gonna want to use that tool from O'Reilly's. I just went to mine, they did not have it. So just for the sake of the video here, I'm gonna show you how to reassemble it. But one thing to note about this locking plate is that you see the teeth, the way they're cut, it can only fit on the shaft one way. So when you put this piece on, you'll have to line the locking plate up perfectly with it, so that this little protrusion here comes through in this area here in the slot in the locking plate. And then you also need to make sure that you have the locking plate on the steering shaft in the correct orientation, because like I said, it only fits on one way. So I'll do that real quick and then come back to you guys. Okay, we got those 3 components together, the spring, that piece for the horn, and our locking plate. This is the point where you'd want to use that puller to push this plate down, compress that spring, and then you can put on your little retaining clip that we took off earlier. I'm not going to put this on, but I will continue assembling this just so everyone knows. But again, yeah, at this point, you'd want to push this back with that tool, and then you'll have enough clearance there to slide that that clip in the notch in the right where it goes. So we'll just continue here with this cover plate next. This can be a little tricky to line up too because you can't see anything. So once that's done, you'll just want to slide in this little spring contact piece here for the horn. Just goes in like that. And then we can put on our steering wheel. If you use that tool correctly, everything will be held in place by that clip that I showed you earlier. So this will be a lot easier. But basically, just line this up so it comes through the hole. And then you'll put that nut on, tighten it down, and that's pretty much it. No need to really show that because it's pretty self-explanatory, but then you can also put in your horn assembly and pop on that center cover. And then that's pretty much it, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. I have a bunch of detailed pictures of this as well, so if anyone needs those or find them helpful, let me know and I could send them out or whatever. But yeah, that is how you take apart and reassemble your GM steering column from the late 60s or your Corvette.